You know the story, right? Two families at war, a secret romance, a tragic ending. Romeo and Juliet. It's the love story. And we all have this image of a young Shakespeare, filled with passion, just scribbling away. But what if I told you that picture we have in our heads isn't the real story at all? Okay, let's get into this.
Yeah, that whole idea, which we can probably thank the amazing movie Shakespeare in Love for, is, well, historically completely misleading. The thing is, Shakespeare wasn't really an inventor of plots. He was a master recycler, a genius who could find an existing story and polish it into something timeless. And the tale of the star-crossed lovers from Verona? It was no exception.
So that leads us to the big question. If Shakespeare didn't dream it up, who did? And this is where it gets fun. Think of this as a historical detective story. We're going to follow the clues, follow the literary breadcrumbs, all the way back to find the real mastermind behind the world's greatest love story.
All right, so to crack this case, we have to work backwards from Shakespeare. Just like with his other huge hits, like Hamlet or Macbeth, he didn't pull the plot out of thin air. He found a story that was already out there, making the rounds, and he saw its absolute incredible potential.
And here it is, the whole paper trail laid out. In 1597, Shakespeare writes his play, right? But he based it on an English poem from 1562 by a guy named Arthur Brooke. But wait, Brooke was just translating an Italian story from 1554, and that writer, Matteo Bandello, basically copied his entire story from a novella published way back in 1531. And that, right there, is our ground zero. It's the first version that has everything we recognize: the feuding families, the secret wedding, the sleeping potion, the whole tragic double suicide finale.
So the man of the hour, the true architect of the story we all know, was this guy, Luigi da Porto. He was an Italian nobleman, a soldier, and a writer. And to really get how he came up with this masterpiece, we have to understand the world he was living in, a world full of violence, passion, and some seriously messy politics. At the very heart of this story is the feud. Two households both alike in dignity, but for da Porto, that ancient grudge wasn't just some clever plot device. It was his actual everyday reality. He was surrounded by this kind of brutal hatred between powerful families, and he poured that reality right onto the page.
Just take a look at this. This is the coat of arms for the Savergnan family. They were the most powerful clan in the region where da Porto was stationed as a soldier. And you see how it looks like a tree splitting in two? That's basically the perfect visual for what was happening. The family had split into two warring factions, totally consumed by old hatreds. Does that sound a little familiar?
And the parallel is so direct, it's crazy. In the story, you've got the Capulets and Montagues in Verona. In da Porto's real life, in the city of Udine, you had the Zamberlani, who were pro-Venice, and the Strumieri, who backed the Holy Roman Empire. And these weren't just political disagreements. We're talking street brawls, assassinations. The hatred was so bad, they'd literally start fistfights inside the cathedral during Mass.
And get this, da Porto wasn't just some passive observer watching from the sidelines. His own uncle on his mother's side, a guy named Antonio Saverdan, was the toughest nails leader of the pro-Venice faction. So da Porto was right there, smack in the middle of it all, watching how family loyalty and politics could lead straight to bloodshed.
Okay, so the feud was definitely real. But what about those names? Montague and Capulet. They're so iconic. Did da Porto just make them up? Oh, not at all. The story behind the names is just as wild.
So the Montecchi, or Montagues as we know them, were 100% real. They were a real family, originally from Verona, who had been exiled and ended up living in Udine, right where da Porto was. He actually knew them. In fact, one of them was the right-hand man to da Porto's uncle. He even gives them a shout-out in his novella, basically winking at the reader, letting them know his fictional family was based on a real one.
And the Capuletti, or Capulets? Okay, this is where it gets really amazing. This whole thing was born from a historical mistake. Da Porto found the name in Dante's Purgatorio. Now, the popular commentary books at the time all said they were a rival family from Verona. The only problem? The commentary was wrong. The Capuletti weren't a family from Verona at all. They were a political group from a totally different city. So a simple literary error passed down for centuries gave us one of the most famous family names in history. How cool is that?
All right, now we get to the real heart of the mystery. Because for da Porto, this story wasn't just about politics. It was deeply, deeply personal. And the biggest clue he left for us is right at the beginning of his novella, a dedication he wrote to a real woman named Lucina Savorgnan.
He writes, to the most beautiful and graceful Lucina Savorgnan. For hundreds of years, people just thought, oh, that's a nice, polite dedication to his cousin. But historians now think this little sentence is the key that unlocks a real-life love story, or maybe a real-life love triangle that was the true inspiration. And there are three main theories about what was going on.
Okay, hypothesis number one is the most romantic one. In this version, Romeo is basically Luigi di Porto. Juliet is Lucina. And the story? It's a heartbreaking, autobiographical tale about their own failed romance, probably wrecked by their families fighting just like in the plot. It's his way of making their lost love immortal.
Hypothesis 2 paints a totally different picture of Del Porto. He's not the heartbroken lover, he's the supportive friend. In this theory, Juliet is still Lucina, but Romeo is her actual boyfriend, a guy named Francesco Savorgnan, who had been forced into exile. So, Del Porto writes the story as a gift for his cousin, to encourage her to stay loyal to her man while he's gone, using Juliet's devotion as the ultimate example.
But then there's a third theory, and this one is way more cunning. In this scenario, di Porto was also in love with Lucina and saw Francesco as his rival. So he writes the story where Juliet is Lucina and Romeo is Francesco. But it's not encouragement, it's a warning. It's a dark, cautionary tale meant to show Lucina just how dangerous and destructive an obsessive love like hers can be, secretly hoping he could scare her away from Francesco and, well, right into his arms.
So which is it? A tragic romance, a supportive gift, or a strategic warning? The answer might actually be in the words da Porto himself used in that dedication to Lucina. And, you know what? They seem to point right at that darker third theory. I mean, listen to this. He says he wrote it so she could see to what cruel deaths lovers are led by their passion. He isn't celebrating love here. He's pointing out how it can absolutely destroy you. He's basically saying, hey, look what happens when you love someone this much. It ends in a tomb. This isn't a love letter, it's a warning label.
So, did Del Porto's brilliant, if a little manipulative, literary strategy actually work? Nope, not even close. In a pretty beautiful twist, real life had a much happier ending than his story. Francesco Savorgnan eventually came back from exile, and he and Lucina got married. Their love went out, completely defying the tragic fate that Del Porto had written for them.
Which leaves us with this one last incredible question. Was the story that has defined romance for 500 years actually born from a celebration of love? Or was it a brilliantly written, deeply personal warning designed to kill a romance? It's just an amazing reminder that behind our greatest stories, there's often an even more complicated and fascinating human reality.